She called me a liability, said it in front of the entire floor. 23 people watched me set my badge on her desk and walk out. I didn't say a word. That was a Tuesday. By Friday, the building had no running water because nobody knew where the maintenance contract was filed. I did. It was in my head. My name is not important. What matters is that for 11 years, I was the person who held Meridian Property Group together from the inside. Not the CEO, not the VP of operations. Me. The facilities coordinator nobody ever promoted, nobody ever thanked, and apparently, nobody ever thought to be afraid of losing. I started at Meridian when it was still 3 people in a leased office above a nail salon. Back then, Lorraine Voss was sharp. She'd built the company from a single commercial property management contract into a regional firm handling 42 buildings across 4 states. She was the kind of woman who remembered every subcontractor's birthday and could read a balance sheet like a novel. I respected her completely. The problem wasn't Lorraine. The problem was her son-in-law. Everett Crane came into the picture when he married Lorraine's daughter in the spring of the company's 8th year. He was 31. He had an MBA from a school with a good football team, a subscription to 3 different business newsletters, and the absolute certainty of a man who has never been wrong because he has never been truly tested. Within 6 months, he was sitting in on board meetings. Within a year, he was running them. Lorraine told us he was bringing fresh energy. She said it the way people say things they've been told to believe. Her daughter was happy. That was enough for her. For me, I watched Everett spend his first year rearranging things that didn't need rearranging. He rebranded our internal tracking system with a new logo. He hired a consultant to tell us what our company culture was. He replaced the coffee machine in the break room with a smoothie station nobody used. Small things, annoying things, but small. Then the big things started. He let our longest-serving property supervisor go because she didn't align with the new direction. She'd been managing our highest revenue portfolio for 9 years. 3 of her clients called within a month asking where she went. He renegotiated our landscaping vendor contract to save 4%, and in doing so, offended a man a man I'd worked with for a decade. That vendor had given us priority scheduling during ice storms, flood cleanup, emergency situations. After Everett's renegotiation, we went to the back of the queue like everyone else. I watched all of this. I kept my mouth shut and I kept doing my job. My job technically was facilities coordination. What that meant in practice was that I was the connective tissue of the entire organization. I knew every building code variance we'd applied for in the last decade. I had personal relationships with every inspector in our territory. Not because I'd networked strategically, but because I'd shown up, been straight with them, and never once wasted their time. I knew which HVAC vendors would answer at 2 a.m. and which ones would ghost you. I had the master login credentials for 17 different platforms. I knew where the physical copies of every lease addendum were stored because I'd created the filing system myself in year 2 when the old one fell apart. Nobody had ever asked me to train a backup. I'd asked twice in writing to bring someone in to shadow me, once in year 6, once in year 9. Both times the request sat in Lorraine's inbox until it quietly disappeared. There was always a reason. Budget. Timing. We'll revisit this next quarter. Next quarter never came. When Everett took over as acting CEO, Lorraine had a health scare, nothing life-threatening but enough that she stepped back. I gave it 3 months before he turned his attention to me. I'd seen the pattern. He was systematically removing anyone who predated him, anyone who had loyalty to the old structure, anyone who might, by their very existence, remind people of how things used to run. I lasted 4 months. It was a Wednesday morning, all-hands meeting in the main conference room. These meetings had become theatre under Everett. He'd stand at the front with a slide deck and talk about pivoting toward a leaner operational footprint, which meant, in plain language, cutting people who cost money but whose value was hard to put in a cell on a spreadsheet. That morning he had a new slide. He called it relining core functions. My name was on it. "We're moving to a fully outsourced facilities model," he said. "Effective immediately, the in-house coordinator role is being eliminated." He didn't look at me when he said it. He looked at his slides. I remember the room going quiet. Not a dramatic movie silence. Just the specific quiet of people who are relieved it isn't them, feeling bad about feeling relieved. I looked at Everett. He looked at his next slide. I took my building access card, my vendor directory binder, and my personal coffee mug. I left the access card on his desk. The binder I took home. The coffee mug was mine. I'd bought it myself. I didn't make a scene. I didn't send a goodbye email. I didn't say anything to anyone except Sandra at the front desk, who had been kind to me for 11 years and deserved a real goodbye. I told her to take care of herself. She cried a little. I didn't. I cried later in my car in the parking garage, a long time actually. 11 years is not nothing. It's most of a decade. It's watching a company grow from a nail salon office into something real. It's caring about a thing that turned out not to care about you back. So yes, I cried. Then I called my contact at the inspection office and let him know I'd be leaving Meridian. He said he was sorry to hear it. He asked if I'd landed somewhere yet. I told him I had a few conversations in progress. That was true. I hadn't been caught entirely off guard. The outsourced facilities company Everett had contracted was a national firm, efficient, professional, completely unfamiliar with our specific buildings, our specific relationships, our specific history. They were good at what they did. They just didn't know what I knew. The first sign of trouble came 10 days after I left. One of our largest commercial tenants had a pipe burst on a Saturday night. The outsourced firm dispatched their standard emergency crew. That crew didn't know that the water shut off for that building wasn't where the schematic showed it. There'd been a renovation in year 4 that had moved it, and the updated documentation existed only in the binder I had taken home with me and in my head. They found the shut-off eventually, after 40 minutes of water damage that cost approximately $60,000. Everett didn't call me. He had his assistant send an email asking if I would consult on a per-incident basis going forward. I read it twice. Then I wrote back that I'd be happy to discuss a consulting arrangement and mention my rate. My rate was not small. He didn't respond. 3 weeks later, a building permit renewal came due, a complex one, tied to a variance we'd been rolling over for 6 years, which required specific documentation submitted to a specific person in the city office by a specific deadline. I had managed that process every single year. Nobody else at Meridian knew it existed. They missed the deadline. The variance lapsed. Getting it reinstated required a formal hearing, legal fees, and a construction hold that delayed a tenant build-out by 11 weeks. That tenant had a penalty clause in their lease. I had negotiated a version of that lease. I knew exactly what that clause said. The penalty was substantial. Around this time, I heard through the industry network that Lorraine had been given a full picture of what was happening. I don't know who told her. I like to think she asked the right questions and followed the answers. Whatever the case, she was apparently not pleased. Everett's response, I was told, was to explain that these were transition challenges and that any operational disruption was a result of inheriting undocumented processes. He used my departure as the justification for the chaos my departure had caused. I found that impressive in its way. What he apparently did not know was that I had been documenting everything for years. Not because I was planning to leave. Because I am a careful person and I believe in records. I had emails going back to year 2. I had my 2 written requests for a backup hire. I had meeting notes. I had a clear paper trail showing that the undocumented processes had in fact been extensively documented in requests that had been ignored. A former colleague still at Meridian told me that Lorraine had those emails pulled, that she'd read them over a weekend, that she had asked Everett directly why the backup hire requests had never been acted on. He apparently said he'd look into it. That was not the answer she was looking for. I was not there for any of this. I had by that point accepted a position with a competing firm, smaller, more careful, run by a woman who had started in operations and still knew what a building felt like from the inside. My first week there, she sat down with me, a notepad, and 4 hours, and we mapped every single thing I knew. She built a redundancy plan from it. She said she'd learned her lesson once before about single points of failure. I thought about Meridian a lot in those first months. Not with anger exactly, more like the specific grief of watching something you helped build being handled carelessly by people who didn't understand what they had. Lorraine called me once. It was a Thursday evening, about 3 months after I'd left. She didn't ask me to come back. She was too proud for that, and I think she knew I wouldn't. She called to say she was sorry. She said it plainly, without a lot of preamble. She said she should have listened when I asked for a backup hire. She said she'd let things drift in a direction she should have caught sooner. I told her I appreciated her saying that. I meant it. We talked for about 20 minutes. She told me Everett's role had been restructured. She didn't elaborate and I didn't ask. When I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a while. I thought about the binder on my shelf, the coffee mug next to the sink, the 2 unanswered emails from year 6 and year 9, the pipe that flooded for 40 minutes because nobody knew where the shutoff was. I hadn't planned any of it. I hadn't done anything except leave when I was told to leave. Sometimes the most devastating thing you can do to a system is simply stop holding it together. I still have that binder on my shelf. I don't know why I haven't put it away somewhere less visible. Maybe because it reminds me of something I need to keep remembering. For a long time, I thought the hardest part of what happened was being called a liability in front of 23 people, but looking back, that wasn't the hardest part at all. The hardest part was the 11 years before that, the quiet, steady choice made over and over again to do the work well even when nobody was watching, to show up for the 2 a.m. calls, to file the variance paperwork for the 6th year in a row without anyone asking, to write 2 emails requesting a backup hire and then wait and watch them disappear. That kind of integrity doesn't announce itself. It just accumulates, and when it's gone, what it leaves behind is not obvious at first, which is exactly why people like Everett are always surprised. I've thought a lot about what it actually takes to hold something together for a long time. It's not cleverness. It's not ambition. It's a certain kind of quiet honesty with yourself about what the work requires, and then the willingness to do that thing even when the reward is invisible. I did that for 11 years. I was not perfect, but I was consistent, and consistency, it turns out, is what buildings, real and organizational, are actually built on. What I understand now that I didn't fully understand then is that the same discipline that made me valuable also made me invisible. I never made noise about what I knew. I never leveraged my position. I kept my head down and solved problems before anyone else knew they existed. In a healthy organization, that gets recognized eventually. In an organization where someone like Everett is ascending, it gets mistaken for passivity. He looked at me and saw someone who didn't push back. He didn't understand that I'd simply never needed to. The pipe that flooded for 40 minutes was not my fault, but I won't pretend it didn't pain me. I'd built the system that, if used correctly, would have prevented it. Watching it fail from a distance, because I was no longer there to catch it, was its own kind of grief, not satisfaction. Just a slow, factual confirmation that what I had done had mattered, and what had been lost when I left was real. Lorraine's phone call on that Thursday evening was the thing that finally settled something in me. She didn't have to call. She was proud. She was recovering. She had plenty of reasons to let the silence stand. But she called anyway. And she said, sorry plainly, the way someone says it when they actually mean it and aren't trying to get anything back. That took something. I respected it. What I've carried forward into my new position is this. I document everything now, not out of distrust, but out of respect for the work itself. I cross-train my counterpart on everything I know. I've made myself, deliberately and carefully, replaceable in the operational sense, so that the things I've built can survive me. That's not a small thing. It took me 11 years and the public humiliation to understand that building redundancy isn't an admission of weakness. It's the most serious form of professional care. The binder stays on the shelf. Some days I walk past it and feel something like sadness. Other days I walk past it and feel like myself again, like someone who did good work for a long time, and then kept doing it somewhere else for someone who understood what they had. That's enough. It really is.